All right, guys. Thank you so much, Maggie. I'm going to try my best to keep up with that energy. Love the story. I'll ask you later. She's really, really good at cooking some good vegan curry, by the way. Hit her up. Everyone, my name is Michelle Huang. I'm talking about minimalism in my backpacking journey. As many of you know, I went on a little trip this past summer where I traveled across Europe. And I'd like to break it down into a few deeper elements in that. It was more than just going around to see big tourist destinations. For me, it was really about investigating the inside and really asking myself, what is this about and what things matter to me most. This is Trekking Towards Change. It's all in the hips. So let's take it back a few steps from the beginning. My name is Michelle, and I was born kind of weird. My father is a Japanese immigrant, and by the nature of his job, we were sent across the country multiple times to move to support the family, and that was fine with me. I absolutely loved that, but we didn't have too much, and from the economic means that we had, I was surrounded by communities in which I was constantly hearing the term or the phrase, people like us just don't do those things. When I would go to libraries and talk about these really exciting books and people who are going on great adventures, starting their own businesses, living their dreams. And I wasn't okay with that. I didn't like that statement. People like us just don't do those things. And like Maggie said, as an angsty young girl, nothing fuels you more than when someone tells you that you can't do something. So I tried to do everything. I took on a lot of responsibility from a young age where I tried to get involved in leadership projects. I tried to be best friends with everybody. I tried to have great grades, and things went well for a really long time. Fast forward a few years, and I'm going from San Francisco to New York when I'm accepted into NYU, and on the surface, everything's pretty, and my friends would always comment little things like, oh my gosh, Michelle, you're living the dream, you're living the dream. And I felt like it, I guess, from a social media standpoint, but inside I didn't really know what I was doing yet. I felt kind of lost about it, and I felt really scared too. And here's my view from Washington Square Park. I had an apartment right there, and again, everything was supposed to be great, but I hated it. And I was constantly battling this element of time. As many of you know, at NYU especially, we're constantly packing our schedules and trying to fill in all of our empty holes, snaps to that, on our iCalendar, and making it a personal challenge to see how much can I really shove into these 24 hours. And at first it was fun, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to do in New York City, there's a lot to be had, but I found myself crunching too much on, and I was downloading apps on my iPhone constantly, for time savers or ways to track what you're doing to be more efficient, to be more organized. And no matter what I did, I just couldn't figure it out, and my time, even though it was the same 24 hours every single day, felt like less and less and less, and I did not know what I was doing. So I was losing sleep, my relationships were dwindling, my grades were falling, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was because, again, everyone kept on telling me, Michelle, you're living the dream, and I didn't feel that inside. So I had these really big questions in my life where I was asking, how am I supposed to manage everything I want to do? Being in New York City, you have a lot of yogis, a lot of meditation gurus, blah, 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 and they're always telling you, live in the present moment, take everything on day by day, relax, life is simple. And I could not cope with that. I could not understand how a person was meant to live in New York City and take on, X, Y, and Z opportunities that are gifted to you in this place, but still feel content and feel like I'm maximizing those chances. And so I was fortunate enough to be invited over to this speech given by the Karmapa at Princeton University this past spring. And for those of you who don't know, the Karmapa is a huge Buddhist figure in the Buddhist tradition, and he's meant to be a reincarnated figure from the 15th century. So this is the 17th said figure of the Karmapa, and he's meant to have a lot of wisdom, right? Because this guy's been around for so-called 500 years. And here's me at his grand speech. I'm there in a blue blazer. I was really stoked to hear his great conversations and to maybe learn something big from him. And I was fortunate enough to also be invited to a small little breakfast on his last day headed out, where we were able to ask him personal questions and have a really, really one-on-one conversation where we could have those intimate discussions. And it was awkward because he also had a translator. His English wasn't too fabulous. He could listen, but he couldn't speak back, kind of like me here in Spain. And I asked this question about time. I asked him, you're not from the Western world, and you're telling me that I need to focus on the present moment, to always be here in the now, and I don't know how to cope with that when I still have to be looking towards the future and preparing myself for my job competition that's around the corner and to prepare myself for a family. How do I navigate those types of responsibilities while still keeping a peace of mind? And The translator fumbles around with my questions for a while, and the Karmapa, as you can see, he is bald, was scratching his bald head for quite some time trying to figure out how to answer me, and he was really confused by my question. And finally he comes around to say this story, which I love to share, and I'm happy I get to share this with you all today. He says that, I don't want to mess this up. He says, in my village where I grew up, in the valleys of India, we did not have watches. Watches were only for select elites in our community. The sun would rise, we would wake up and do our daily responsibilities, and we would spend the rest of our day eating and playing and sharing our days with our people until the night came and fell and we would begin again. Time did not exist. Time is an illusion. You Westerners made it up. When you stop allowing the illusion to tell you what to do, you will be free. You will be in control. You will be free. You will be in control. And those words kept on repeating and repeating and repeating in my head, and I couldn't make sense of it because I wanted to fight with him right there. You know, I'm angsty, I'm young, I'm at NYU, I have a free spirit, and I wanted to tell him, you know, I don't agree with that. I think that's too easy of an answer. But I bit my tongue. This guy's been around for 500 some years, and I thought maybe there's some truth to this. And so I sat on it, and I meditated on it, and it was rough. It was really, really rough. And I started searching for answers. And being at NYU with a lot of international students, you hear about this thing called gap years. I didn't know what a gap year was until I had a British roommate who took one herself, and she told me that a gap year was a common thing in Europe and in Australia, I guess too, where you finish high school, and instead of applying to colleges and all the IVs like we do in the United States, jumping into the next step, students take 1 year off and they travel the world to try and find themselves, whatever that means. And I was inspired by that. I knew I didn't have a full year to take off, but I had a summer. And so I decided to start selling things. I had a crap load of things in my apartment back in New York, living in Chinatown. And it was too much for me, and I didn't have the time to get a job, so I sold everything I had. I began to simplify. And many of you might have actually seen me from the NYU Free and for Sale page, because that is partially what funded my trip. And I began to ask these big questions each time I picked up an object in my room, and I would ask, where did this object come from? That was my first question as I was trying to sift through everything. And I would get really nostalgic and have all these past memories of, you know, this party where I got this weird like hula necklace or whatever, or I have these photos and I would reminisce on those things and those past relationships. And I felt so heavy with all of these emotions, and that question wasn't enough. That wasn't working for me to get rid of enough things. So I moved to the next question. Is this item good for me? Will this item actually help me when I'm backpacking? Will I need this when I'm traveling? And that got rid of a lot of things, because you don't need 500 dresses or heels or books or essays. I sold essays too, fun fact, sorry. I sold a lot of things, and still I had way too much stuff. I went on to the third question of, are you really, really true for me? Does this object serve me and the person that I am today? Are these objects a collection of my past? Are they just collecting dust at this point? And the answer to most of that was sadly yes. So I got rid of everything. And in my favor, I also had a 23 kilogram limit, in other words, 50 pounds, to my backpack, which I was taking around with me through Europe. And 50 pounds is not a lot of things when you're crunching your whole entire life down into that space. So finally I made the cut. I sold everything. There's my empty apartment in Chinatown, and I thought I'd made it. I thought that was it. I thought I was going to go to Europe and everything was going to be great, and I made the cut. I didn't. I traveled all across Europe. This is the route that I took. And when I started in London, my backpack was really freaking heavy still. And when I was walking around the city, I literally felt weight. And I would come back to my hostel in the evening, and I literally had bruises on my hips from how much crap I was still carrying on my back. And I couldn't do this. I just started my trip. It was a 3-month trip. I still had, 9 months to go in Spain as well, and I couldn't carry this. And so I decided to deload. I took out technology when I was in London. I took out my white clothes when I was in Amsterdam, because when you're traveling, you don't have a washer and dryer to depend on. When I was in Berlin, I got rid of my extra books. I was carrying 7. There's no way I was going to read 7 books while I was traveling. That didn't make sense. And I kept on, unloading literally weights off of my back to try and enhance my trip. And it came to this point in which I thought, I'm getting rid of all these things, but I still feel stressed. I thought that so many of my problems were related to all the material objects that I'd been collecting. And it turns out it was a lot more than that. A lot of the weight that I was feeling was about my emotional relationships and emotional baggage that I was still carrying with me through Europe. And that didn't abandon me just because I had a lighter backpack. And so I started to sift through my habits and my relationships and the ideas that I held to be really dear to me, asking myself those 3 major questions. I also came across a hostel where they have, I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but they have that free book section where essentially it's the lost books that everyone forgot when leaving, but they say it's a donation thing for you to enjoy. And I picked up this great book that had this quote, and I would love to share this with you guys today. It says, "Our souls are not hungry for fame, comfort, wealth, or power. Our souls are hungry for meaning, for the sense that we have figured out how to live so that our lives matter," said by Harold Kushner, who was a Jewish rabbi born and raised in Brooklyn. And these words hit me so, so hard. Our souls are hungry for meaning. And I was going on this trip, and I was taking great Instagram photos, and everyone was commenting saying, "Again, Michelle, you're living the dream." But I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like I was living anything because I didn't have meaning to what I was doing. And so I began to look at my habits a little bit further, and I realized I was going to all these spots and great locations because I was doing these really, really cheesy Google searches, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, best things to see in Copenhagen, best things to see in Brussels. And I was going to things like Monsieur Piss or The Little Mermaid and being let down constantly because I was told to enjoy these things, these monuments and these statues and these museums, but they didn't have any real significance to me. I was just being told I was meant to enjoy these things, and I realized that's not how I want to continue for the rest of this trip. And so I dove pretty deep inside of myself and asked those big questions of what does this trip mean to me? What do I want to discover? I want to discover culture. And so I started traveling east into the Balkan regions where everyone told me to not go because it was supposed to be dangerous. I was supposed to feel scared. I was supposed to be alone. And turns out that part of my trip was actually one of the best parts that I experienced. Going through Sarajevo, through Bosnia, through Bulgaria and Turkey. And this minimalism thing, really, really took a tone on me as a person and my personality, where I wasn't only asking myself these, minimalizing questions about my things, but about my ideas and the person that I wanted to be today, and whether or not, again, the things I was holding inside of me were serving the person I wanted to be today for tomorrow. And I really challenge you guys to try and take a look at your own lives and to see where you can declutter things, whether it's through your own apartment as you're going back to Madrid or back to New York or back to North Carolina, wherever you guys may be from, even Stanford. And I want you guys to take a look at the things that are really cluttering your own lives and whether or not the baggage you're carrying within you, maybe emotionally as well, is something that's serving you still to this day. As I went through all of this, it started with a backpack, right? But it ended up transforming into a whole entire lifestyle change. And I feel a lot more clean now. I feel like because I've eliminated so many bad relationships and bad grudges too, I have so much more freedom and space in my head to fill my life with the things that matter, with the people that matter, that serve me and the person that I want to be today and for tomorrow. And I'm really able to delegate my energy as such so that I don't feel overwhelmed. And compared to New York, I'm taking on much less responsibility than I was, back in New York. But even so, my work has markedly improved because why? I can put my heart into it, and then I have the time and the energy to do so. And with that, it all started in the hips.